Hello, everyone, and welcome back to class, sort of, as it's going to be for the rest of the semester. Hope you all stayed safe and at least got a little bit of rest over spring break. So this week we're going to be slowly rolling back into classes. So the lecture is going to be a little bit shorter, a little bit less information. There's far less homework than there usually would be. We're going to kind of slow roll it back in. And on that note, I want to point out that that does mean our syllabus is going to get adjusted a little bit if we take a look at the later weeks after spring break. So we're currently on this week. This is week 9. This week and the next one are going to kind of get stretched out over 3 weeks because we have this reading day week, but we don't need that anymore because this week right here is individual check-ins. So all of these weeks are just going to move down one and be a week later. And we're going to be kind of covering 2 weeks worth of material over the next 3 weeks. It'll give us more time with animation, give us time to figure out this whole online class situation without just barreling forward into everything. All right, so that is where that is going. So the first thing I want to do then is review very quickly a couple of things. So I'm going to review just very briefly masks and then a couple things to do with animation. Now, if you would like a longer, more in-depth review of these things, you can scroll down through the announcements. Go to week 8, you'll see basic keyframes and classic tweens on that week. And if you scroll down even further, you'll see a whole thing on masks over here. But just briefly, I want to go over these things with you here to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, so. Okay, so I imported this JPEG while the video is paused. But remember that masks are a way of applying the alpha channel of one layer. So in this case, the alpha channel of the text to a completely different layer. In this case, this picture of fire, right? So it's going to make it look like it's taken this fire layer and cut it up into something that's the shape of the words Firestarter. But what it's actually doing is it's changing the alpha channel. It's taking the alpha channel of the text and applying it to this layer. And so the way we do that is I've muted everything else so we can't see it, and we simply put the shape layer, like the layer that has the outline we want, on top of the layer that has the image that we want, and then we right click the top layer and we say mask. Ta-da! And as long as those two layers stay together, it's going to work. If you drag one away from the other, it doesn't work. If you unlock one, it doesn't work. If you change the order of these two, it doesn't work. If you wanted it to not work, you could right click and turn off the part that says mask and then unlock them. So again, right click, mask, we turn it into a mask. So that is what we're going to be using that with some animation later today. So I want to make sure we remember how to do that. Also, if there's any adjustments you need to make, if I want to change where the image is, I need to unlock the layer, which turns off the mask temporarily. And then I can bring this down here. As soon as I lock it, it turns back on. And as soon as you test the movie, if you hit Control Enter, it turns it back on. So the fact that it's locked and not working here, it'll still play properly, which will also matter in animation. All right, but just a quick overview of masks there. So, all right, slightly less quick overview or review of animation because it's been an age since we had class. So we went over 2 kinds of animation, one with basic keyframes and one with tweens. So I have this thing here, it's a movie clip. Most tweens need movie clips. And I'm going to do a little bit of basic keyframing. And the way basic keyframing works is we right click and we say insert keyframe. And remember that this keyframe is now different than this one. And I'm actually going to... I'm going to make this look bigger. There we go. Maybe now we can see what's going on the screen. So this keyframe, different than this one, which means if I'm on the last keyframe and I move this over, we get this change, right? But if we're using just standard keyframes, if we want anything in the middle, we have to right click, insert keyframe, and move this over. But of course, how do we know what's in between these two? Well, we have a couple of options, including onion skinning, and I do apologize if you are on if you're on Animate 2020, yours will look slightly different than mine. You will have a drop-down box somewhere in your controls that has to do with onion skinning and edit multiple frames. I cannot update to that point, so I'm stuck with the 3 buttons. They are called the same things though. So as soon as you find the one that says onion skinning, you turn that on. I pull the brackets out. Now I can see I'm favoring one side, so I could put this in the middle. And the way keyframing works is that I would constantly have to put in in-betweens, or if you do it like we did with the bouncing ball, then we're going first frame, next frame, next frame. It all depends on how you're wanting to split things up. And you can also use hotkeys. F6 is a hotkey for whatchamacallit, adding a keyframe. And each time I make a new keyframe, 2 keyframes in a row will be identical, and we have to change one of them, otherwise it's going to hold. But once you get enough of them, you will start to get something that looks like animation. It needs even more than that in order to look smooth, or it needs to simply move faster. I can take out one of these frames, Shift F5, or right click remove frame. We'll take out one frame from each section. Oh, that one's that one has 2. And what that does is speed things up. So instead of holding on each place, it's actually moving forward. This is called on 2s. So the default animation setting for me is 24 frames a second. If you open up your project and it goes to 30 frames a second, you might want to change that to 24 as soon as possible. It says 30 or 24 FPS, only because everything I do is going to be 24 frames a second. So if you try to make your thing the same amount of frames, you'll probably end up with it being a little bit faster or slower depending on what's happening. Faster if it's 30 frames a second. And also 30 frames a second is a lot of frames to work with. Also, a thing that is happening, the end one only has 1 frame. So everything else we've done has 2 frames. It holds for 2. So I need to come here, right click, insert frame. So things we are remembering: frames are different than keyframes. Frames will follow the previous keyframe for however many there are until we get to the next keyframe. Keyframes are where change happens. You cannot have any kind of change without a keyframe. If I go to this last keyframe, and then I go to the frame after it, and I put this back over here, you see, first of all, the whole thing highlighted. Did you notice that? The whole thing highlights. It's trying to tell you this is all the same. If I go back to this keyframe, it's over here. Alright, so, but we did this with the bouncing ball assignment, which I'll open up in just a second. So you'll remember when we did the bouncing ball, it was a whole bunch of individual frames set up like this. We can turn the... Oh good, it's not in here. And every frame had its own, or every frame was its own keyframe, and every keyframe was its own individual drawing, and that's how we got this to move across the screen. So it does take a lot of drawings to do this like this. We usually stick with these kinds of things, not for full-on animation like this, especially not for sliding things across the screen, which we'll get to in a moment. Alright, but that is the first form of animation we learned. So let me close this. Now if I want to get rid of something, I can actually just select a whole bunch of stuff, right click, remove frames, and it does bring me back to sort of square one, where this just started. So, come out here, the other kind of animation, and actually let me bring up, I just wanted to bring up the description of things. So what I just showed was this thing at the bottom, individual frames. Yes, we can use this with hand-drawn animation. We use this with replacement parts. We use it with things that we just need to happen directly. But the one I'm going to show you now, the purple one, that is the classic tween. So that is what we learned last time before we went on break. And that's the one where the computer will do a lot of the work for you. So I can come in here and I can say, I want this to slide across the screen. And so we kind of do what we did before. We say insert keyframe. And then on that second keyframe, we slide this across the screen so that we have this. But instead of putting in a whole bunch of other keyframes, we go over here, we right click, and we say create classic tween. Timeline turns purple, and this slides across. It slides across evenly. We're going to learn this week how to make it not even. But we can key motion, we can key spinning to an extent, we can key opacity, we can key scale, we can key all manner of things with this classic tween. And this is going to be your workhorse animation technique. This is going to be the thing you use the most because it can apply to filters, it can apply a color effect, it can apply to any of the transforms, and it has eases, and. There's lots of different things that we can apply this to. But just simply, it takes the start point, takes the end point, and then interpolates everything in between. It can only do that because this is a movie clip. Understand that this must be a symbol of some sort. The symbol of choice for us is movie clip. Occasionally the book files will have graphic symbols rather than movie clips, but it has to be one of those. Drawn objects don't count. Regular drawing doesn't count. Needs to be on its own layer. So for the foreseeable future, at least for exercises, I will be providing you with files, even for lectures. That way you can know exactly what, you can have exactly the same files that I'm working with, right? So this is the one we're going to be learning about a lot more this week, and something similar, which is called a shape tween. All right, but if you want more options, again, go to Blackboard, go to the announcements, and if you go back to week 8, you will see all the reviews on here. Otherwise, you can continue on to the next video where we're going to learn about shape tweens.